We have quite the April before us here as a church. We're kind of doing a bit of a refresher campaign. We're not focusing so much on the commitments as much as the spiritual endeavor that we have been on and refreshing that. Some of you have received the VIP visits. I hope those have been good. We've got the rally coming up, a prayer vigil coming up, and as well as the dinner at the end of the month. And so we are going to be using this time in April as a new sermon series, kind of delving us deeper into kind of the spiritual roots of stewardship and just understanding God's place in our life. And so that's why this is called First Things First. We understand this principle. Mom, I'd like to go to my friends. Sure, but first things first. Got to clean your room. Mom, I'd like to watch some TV. Sure thing. First things first. Chores have got to be done, right? There's a right priority here. Now, that's kind of out of the choosing, but there are also things in life where it just, by necessity, you have to get the right thing set first, right? It'll just mess everything up. And so we want to look at a story today. We want to go all the way back to the beginning of faith, to a story about Abraham. This is the guy that just, when God said, we got to get the world back on track, he says, I'm going to work with this guy and his family. And he calls him out of his hometown and says, you know what, let's start new. Let's start fresh. I want you to follow me and trust me and come to a new place. And so Abraham says yes. And he comes into his new land, and it's really good. God's blessing him, and things are going well. But there's one thing that Abraham wants above all else. More than just God's blessing in his life. He goes, God, all the sheep and the cattle and the goats, hey, that's great. But I'm going to have to leave that to a servant because I don't even have a son. I don't have an heir to pass this along to. If there's anything that I would like, that's what I'd like most of all. Eventually, God says, Abraham, I'm not only going to bless you, but I will answer your prayer. I will give you a son. Now, it takes a number of years. Abraham gets older and older. His wife gets older and older, although she only turned 19 5 times. Miraculously, eventually, Isaac arrives. And he is the joy and the delight of their life. They're wonderful. Wow, this is great, God. You came through for us. It took a long time, but you finally came through. This is the son that we love, and we're so thankful, and you're a good God. And God said, sure, but first things first. There's something I need you to do, Abraham. I need you to take that son that I have given to you, and I want you to give him back. I want you to take him and offer him on a hill back to me. What a request. What type of God would request that? If I'm Abraham, I'm packing up the station wagon. We're getting out of town. We're pulling a Jonah. I'm done with this, God. He gave me what I wanted. That's good enough. He doesn't have the right to ask for this back. How could he ask for this? How could he take the one son that I love, the one thing that I really wanted in life? How could he ask for that back? Somehow Abraham kind of processes this and goes, okay, God, I'm going to do this. And so as we read in Genesis 22, he takes Isaac. They go on a couple-day trip. He loads him up with some wood. He brings the knife. He brings the fire, and they set on out. Isaac goes, hey, I know what this looks like. I understand about giving our due to God and honoring God and preparing a sacrifice for this. They travel. They start going up the mount, and he kind of starts to notice, well, we've got all the elements except for one. And so he goes, Dad, I see we got the wood, the fire, and the knife. Where's the sheep? Where's the animal that we're going to offer to God? What a whale of a question. It kind of puts Abraham into a bit of a corner here. What is he going to tell him? Is he going to say, you're it, son? That's going to go well, right? Well, he answers this way. God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son. and the two of them went on together. What a line. Now, is Abraham pulling the parent trick here? Right? Say whatever you need to say to the kids to just kind of get the car down the road. Oh, yeah, sure, we'll stop for dinner at home. Right? Right? And so he's just kind of delaying the inevitable. God himself will provide a lamb. Don't you worry about it. All we got to do is get to the top of the hill and get this deed done, as horrendous as it is. I don't think so. I don't think he's just pulling the parent trick. I think Abraham is speaking out of a place of deep faith and trusting God. I mean, he wouldn't even begin this journey if there wasn't a level of trust, a level of understanding. Where does that come from? Where did that start? How did Abraham get to this place of going, I've received from God, and now I've got to give it back, that I believe that God will provide for whatever we need? Well, there's an interesting story several chapters before this. Back at the very kind of beginning of Abraham's walk with God, his relationship with God. In fact, at that time, he had a bit of a different name. His name was just Abram, because he didn't have an agreement, a covenant with God yet. That came in between these times, and so he started as Abram, and it's in Genesis 14. Now, Genesis 14 is one of those wonderful chapters that you wish that the pastor would call on you to go, will you read this out loud to the class? Because the first 12 verses is nothing but a bunch of names and places. I looked at that and I was like, yeesh, I don't even want to read that. That's hard. It's because it's describing kind of a chaotic situation. Abraham has come from his homeland. He's come into the land of Canaan. And he's just kind of a pass-through guy. He's an immigrant here. And he's trying to keep to himself, keep out of the way. But there is trouble on the plains. There are a number of different people groups, and 4 of them have joined together and have basically ruled the roost for about a dozen years or so. About 13 years, they have put their thumb on everybody else going, hey, you got to do what I say, and your stuff is my stuff. They love that type of economy because it really works out well for them. Well, after about 13 years, the other groups went, we've had enough. And they band together and they rebel. And so what we have here at the beginning of Genesis 14 is really this kind of massive fight between these 4 kings that have been oppressing the folks and these 5 kings that are saying, we've had enough. And they come out, they pick the battlefield, they arrive. They don't really tell much about the battle, but it goes badly. Badly for the 5 kings, the people that are trying to win their freedom. I don't know whether, they have a 5-4 advantage, but maybe they're a smaller people group. Maybe they're just not very good fighters. I don't know. They don't really say anything. But not only are they routed in the fight, but they have picked the worst possible place to fight this fight, because as they're retreating, there are tar pits, hidden tar pits that they are retreating through. And so if they survive the sword and the spear, they're running and they're falling in the tar pits and dying. I mean, it couldn't have been a bigger blunder in any way. Disaster from start to finish. Here we have these people kind of living life like we're kind of sent out there. It's everybody for themselves. I'll take what I can get for myself. If I need to fix something, I'm going to go out and I'm going to do it. It's all really in my hands. It's a picture of absolute chaos. The 4 kings prevail, and it says they seized all the goods of Sodom and Gomorrah and all their food, and then they went away. Oh, those are 2 names that you probably know, right? Not normally in this situation, though. We have them in more intense stories. But this is a story about people in Sodom and Gomorrah being oppressed. They were downtrodden. They had been abused for years, and they were trying to get it right, but they were doing it by their own hands, and it went miserable. So they lost all their possessions. They've lost all their food. Good luck making it through the winter. They've lost their women. Their children have been taken away. They have been decimated. And the 4 kings take off with all the plunder. It's a life that's in pretty much disaster. Well, one person gets away, and he finds this immigrant, Abram, camped, kind of staying off to himself. I'm not getting in the mix of this. I ain't got no dog in this fight. I'm on the outside, and they say, look, this is what has happened. And by the way, your nephew Lot, who started to live in Sodom, has also been taken away, and his daughters and his wives and all his possessions. Abram goes, all right, it's time. And so he saddles up, and it says 318 of his men. I love this verse in here because the Bible oftentimes is kind of general. They generalize numbers, they round things off. 318, not 319, 318 of his men get on their horses, and it's time to round these doggies up. He's not using any of the armies that lost. He's using his own guys, and he's going, we're going to go and make this right. And so they saddle up, they ride off, they chase these guys all the way north. They catch up to him. He kind of looks at the field. He says, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to wait for the cover of darkness. We're going to divide our guys. We're going to hit them from two sides. We're going to get this knocked out. Now, I don't know how many people were just in a battle of 9 armies. He's only got 318. I suspect that he's outnumbered here. But his plot works, and he comes in, and they rout the people, and it says that Abram wins the day, and he recovers all the goods, and he brings back his relative Lot, his nephew, and his possessions together with the women and all the other people. He didn't just go in and get his nephew of going, don't mess with my kid. He liberated this whole number of people from Sodom and Gomorrah who had been taken away, who were going to be going into slavery, whose life was over. He rescues them so that they can go home. I mean, it's an incredible story of rescue and redemption here. He comes back into his camp, and the king of Sodom is there. When the battle went wrong, the king made sure he was the first one out of there. So he's back at the camp. But then there's this new character, Melchizedek. He's the king of Salem, who's not been part of any of this. We don't know kind of where he shows up. Part of this is the name Salem is rooted to the word shalom in Hebrew, which means peace, which means wholeness. He's a king of peace. What the story does is set up a contrast of how Abram is welcomed back home after this tremendous victory. He comes back in, and Melchizedek welcomes him, and it says he brings out bread and wine, and we immediately go, oh, they had communion. Well, communion wasn't around then. None of that was quite set up at that time. We didn't have Moses. We didn't have Jesus yet. But the way that the story is told, mentioning that he's a priest of the Most High God, there is this hint of religious significance, that there is more than just kind of, this is food to eat. This is a ceremony that he's setting up. Having brought those out, then Melchizedek says, praise be to the God Most High, who delivered your enemies, Abram, into your hands. How about that? We had an event, we had a rescue, and this guy is defining what that is. He didn't go, wow, Abram, you are a smart guy. You've got the Rough Riders. You guys are incredible warriors. You went in there and knocked them out, and just like in Taken, and you brought back the captives. It's wonderful. You got people with particular skills. He bypasses that and he says, it's praise be to God. We need to know exactly what happened here, that it is God that did this. It's not just your cunning or your bravery or your weapons or your strategy. God is the one that gave you victory, Abram. I don't know. Wonder how Abram responded to that. I mean, I think that he'd want kind of some props here. But it then simply says, Abram gave 1/10 of the property brought back. 1/10. Now, let's clarify here. was this new stuff that he was getting? Or was this stolen stuff that was just being recovered? It's stolen stuff, right? It's just being recovered. It was already owned, right? I'm just getting it back. But he responded by giving a tenth. It wasn't new stuff. It wasn't new income. It was what I already have. But because God has restored it, I am honoring that. Basically, what's happening here is when Melchizedek says, God did this thing, Abraham said, you are right. You are right. It's not by my hand, it's by God's hand that we have had victory today. I'm not relying on my own strength, on my own abilities, but on God's. And so I honor and I recognize God's role in my life. Now, this is contrasted against the king of Sodom, Bera. He, instead of bringing out and initiating a kind of a ceremony, he goes into striking a deal. He's like, all right, Abram, good job. Here's the deal I want to cut with you. You get to keep all the stuff. I just want my people back. I'm a king. I need some people to rule. If you give me all the people back, we'll go home and we'll reset up shop. You can keep all the stuff because that's it. You're the man. He doesn't mention God. He doesn't really mention Abram, but there's this kind of this implied thing of going, you're the guy that got it done. You're the man. You're the big bad warrior. How do you think Abram responded to this? Well, thank you. Thank you very much, right? He says, I won't take one thing from you. I'm not even going to take a sandal or a shirt. I'm not going to take a strap of a sandal. I don't want one thing from you aside from the supplies that we use going and fighting and coming back. I don't want any spoils to come from this. Wait a minute, what's going on here? He doesn't get the credit and he's got to pay. He's getting the credit and refuses to receive anything. What is going on here? What's happening? The very next line unlocks this whole story. Abram says, I won't take a thing so that you will never be able to say, I made Abram rich. What does that mean? What is he after? Is this a prideful thing? I'm not taking charity. I don't want anything from you. You don't need to help me out. Is it pride? How can it be pride? He's the one that's bringing the stuff to the party. If anybody's getting charity, the king of Sodom is getting charity. It can't be about pride. Abram, by his reaction to Melchizedek and this explanation here, shows his true colors in his soul. God alone is the provider in my life. When I have victory, it is by God's hand. And I don't need to receive anything from anyone else or any other situation that is not of God or says that I did this of my own. Because that's how these gifts were going to be coming. You're the man. You did this. You were clever enough. You were fast enough. You were smart enough. You were brave enough. You deserve it. I don't want a piece of that. My trust is always and only in the God that provides. That's the call. That's the call in his life to come to this new place. Come and follow me and trust me. And Abraham gets it deep down in his soul. This kind of kooky situation just completely reveals the faith of Abram. He will not take any shortcut. He will always stand where God is the provider. And that makes sense now. When we go back to chapter 22, when he's going up the hill with his son, carrying the sticks and the bundle, and he knows what he's called to do, and his son questions him, where is the lamb? God himself will provide the lamb. I know this from years ago. God will provide a way. This is what I'm banking my whole life on. I'm not running away. I'm not skirting the responsibility. I'm not ignoring it. I'm going to stand firmly that says God is good and he will work this out. He continues up the hill with his son. He places the sticks. He binds the hands and feet of his son. He places them on there. And it says he reaches for the knife, fully intending to go through with this. And that's when God interrupts and says, "Stop! Stop! I'm not interested in this. This isn't what I am. I just wanted to know if I was first. Did you start to love the gift more than the giver? Do not harm the boy. Let him be." And as Abraham relented, they noticed in the thicket, in the thorns, there was a ram that had gotten caught. God had provided the ram, and he brings it over and he sacrifices, saving Isaac, restoring his faith in the Lord, confirming his faith in the Lord from the beginning to the end. And so it says that he named the place, "The Lord will provide." The Hebrew transliteration of that is Jehovah Jireh. It's one of our named places throughout the Bible. It's the only place that it's called, but it is named by the right person that saw it from the beginning of his walk with God through to the end, that no matter what circumstance he was in, God provided. As we go through April here, folks, sometimes people want to quickly run to the rule or a lesson. It really is this foundational truth of getting this first thing first, of going, if you don't get it, that every good thing in your life comes from the hand of the Lord, you're going to get it wrong. It starts there. Then I go, everything I have isn't because I'm clever, smart enough, fast enough, strong enough. It's because I trust God and he provides. It's something that I know is true throughout my entire life. From the time that I gave my life to Christ, in all those years and all those circumstances, I could tell you story after story that God has not failed once. He is true to his word. He provides not everything we want, but he provides what we need. He gives us blessing and waits for us to respond and say yes. Every blessing is a choice. Do I take credit for this? Do I go my own way? Or do I stand firmly and say, this is God, and I don't need any shortcut. I don't need anything from any place that denies that reality. I know God will always come through for me. That's the story of Abraham to us. An invitation to get thinking right about the circumstances of our life. Throughout April, instead of next steps on the back of your card, I'm going to be asking you questions. About 4 or 5 questions each week. These are questions that are actually coming out of the book, The Treasure Principle. Remember the book that we studied together? In the back, they have a whole glossary of questions. And these are just promptings for you to take to God and say, can I ask God these and kind of sort through those in my life? What are they going to reveal? Do I have first things first spiritually in my life when it comes to my resources? So take those and work those over and see what they reveal out of your life. Let's pray. Lord, you are good, undeniably good, and you are enough for everything that we need. There's a lot of things that entice us away and say, do it on your own. Just get lucky. Just find it through the shortcut. But Lord, we want to stand firm right alongside Abraham and say, nothing will I receive except from God's hand. He is the one that provides and will always provide in my life. Lord, we trust you. Amen.